Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Friday, July 14th, 2023, and this is episode 768 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Homestead Happenings Day. So we're going to talk about a Midsummer Days update. Yes, it's a play on words for a Midsummer Night's Dream. Welcome to the live, Martinson family and Tom. Guys, if you have questions as we go, put them in all caps, please, so that my aging eyes can see it and star it so that we can hit your questions. And do let people know that we are live. And if you are not a subscriber to my channel, hit that subscribe button and the bell button so you get notifications whenever we go live from the Holler Homestead. Welcome, Faith, Greenberry Grove, and Tori. Today I'm going to talk about what it's like on midsummer in the homestead. And I'm going to talk about the community around us and homesteading communities in general. I'm going to talk about a new Facebook group we are starting in DeKalb County and that's going to serve DeKalb County and surrounding areas. And then I'm going to celebrate some things that have made things a little easier this year. Hi, Chuck. Welcome to the live. That's all happening. Before we jump into that, though, I did want to talk about the featured event for today's show, and we'll bring it up here on the screen. So Wednesday, I did a digital class on home food preservation and water bath canning. And it was $95 unless you bought my Homestead Starter Pack, which if you go to NicoleSauce.com, you can still get that, which is it's 7 classes all in one bundle. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that class. If you bought the class and did not go to it live, the video will be up on Saturday and you can watch the replay of the class. But we started with an overview of home food preservation in general. And then we did a deep dive into water bath canning and we made dilly beans. And I shared my dilly bean recipe in that. The follow-up to this is pressure canning. That's your next step in the canning journey. That is next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central live. If you want to take the class live and get your questions in, you can get that at NicoleSauce.com. Or if you look in the description of today's show, you will see a link that takes you straight to the Podia item. But NicoleSauce.com gets you there as well. That is Wednesday, July 12th. We will be pressure canning bone-in chicken. So that's going to be a really cool one. Of course, if you're a member, you know what to do. Faith says, hit that like. 4 of you haven't. Bah! She's counting. Don't make Faith angry. Tennessee Permaculture is in the room. We should get you on the show, dude. Anyway, good morning, Steve. I don't think we're doing a Holler Neighbor follow-on, Steve, today because I need to get my rear end to Nashville and I want to get out of Nashville before it is rush hour traffic Nashville, which is not my favorite kind of Nashville to be involved in. Anybody who's driven in that mess, getting out of town, especially in the summer, not super fun. Beth, welcome to the live stream. I also wanted to thank today's show sponsors. Our first sponsor of the day is Discount Mylar Bags. Discount Mylar Bags is a Tennessee-based company, small family-run industry, and it started with a dude who's really into prepping. And he was also a procurement manager at Dollar General. And he thought, I'm not like a beast food preserver. I'm not like a beast defender. I'm not like a beast anything except for I'm really good at procurement. And he thought, we're learning all about how to store food and we need supplies for that. And they're hella expensive. And so what he did was he focused his superpower, which is buying things cheap so that he can pass that on to you. And he launched Discount Mylar Bags. Because he wants people to be happy with their purchases, he also developed a really cool resource section. So if you go over to discountmylarbags.com, look on the right-hand side. There's all these resources on how to store food, what size bags are appropriate, what size O2 absorbers to put with what, so you don't mess it up, right? That's really cool. And he sponsors the show, discountmylarbags.com. Our second sponsor of today's show is, in fact, in the community watching this live right now, and that's Strong Roots Resources. Carrie Brown from Strong Roots Resources is a permaculture dude who specializes in smaller properties. He can come to your property and come up with a plan for you to tap into your goals and link them to your property. It's really good to have an outside view for that. But he's really kind of honed in on wild edible plants. And one of the services he offers, which I think is really cool, is he'll walk your property, identify really cool wild edible plants, GPS locate them for you, and give you the map so you can see where they are. It was really funny. A couple weeks ago, I was like, yarrow, it's time for yarrow. And I don't have any on my property. And he's like, I'll bring you some yarrow. I was like, great. And I walked outside and I looked at my food forest and there was yarrow. And I was like, is that yarrow? He said, yeah. Turned out he had put it there in the fall and we both forgot about it. Anyway, really great guy. Check him out at strongrootsresources.com. And he is doing a wild edible plant walk at Self-Reliance Festival.com. I also wanted to give you guys the heads up for one last really cool thing, and that is the Permaculture Adventure Bundle that Paul Wheaton has put together. Is a collection of really cool stuff. It's offering it for $35 until 2 p.m. Mountain today. That's 3 p.m. Central. $514 worth of digital content. It includes my Build Your Heart Smart Homesteading Plan class. We have the foundations, a foundational video on apprenticeship series that serves for an overview of those interested in hand tools and the furniture making process, fruit tree fundamentals, several editions of You Can Have Your Permaculture and Eat It Too, Resilient Off-Grid Home, Tiny House Living, Down the Carrot Hole, the movie, Working Together, the Homestead Tree Handbook, Homestead Building Plan Bundle, hand making natural soaps, a whole bunch of stuff. We even have a John Moody, the amazing elderberry presentation. Elderberry is an amazing plant. Permaculture Design, Life on the Edge, how to get cream from goat's milk and then make that into mozzarella. I do that at home. The Living Farm, Preserving Fruits and Vegetables. It's a really cool little starter pack, all for $35. There is a link in the show notes if you want to do that. And if you're on YouTube, you can just go to the description of the show. Takes you straight there. That's over at permies.com, the permaculture adventure thing, on sale for $35 today until 2 p.m. And yes, that is all of your commercials for today's show. I like to keep that part short. Guys, with the support of these people, that's how we keep the show coming to you. So I really appreciate those of you who support me in that way. This year on the homestead has been the polar opposite of last year. And that's kind of how it is to live when you're like tapped into the outdoors. It's been a really rainy year in a good way. Like it hasn't just rained and not stopped. It's rained and then sunned and then rained and then sunned. And as a result of that, I'm having a banging garden year, right? And I'm really appreciating it after last summer's drought because we just did not have enough grass for the sheep. And this year, it's the opposite. We have plenty of forage from them, and it's really, really awesome. So I just wanted to mention that, like, the midsummer update is that I have things growing at this time of year that aren't usually growing. And I have managed to figure out some things about my gardening here in Tennessee, it was actually a pretty big learning curve for me because I learned to garden in Oregon and the climate here is different. So I had to like adjust all my expectations. I've learned how to get into a season without knowing if it's going to be rainy or dry or the perfect season and set my plants up for success no matter what happens. So I'm feeling pretty good at midsummer. And for once in my life, my garden, I'm not going to say there's no weeds, but there are not weeds up to my head. And usually by this time of year, there are. Hillside Garden could use some help. I have apple mint taking over everything, and I'd like to get it out of there. And Ken Ash, you can just laugh at me about this because you're the one who gave it to me. Yeah. And I didn't even plant it up there. It planted itself when we moved soil. So it's like, once you plant apple mint, I think you just have apple mint. So we are scheduling at midsummer what we do when based on the weather. So today we have a hot outside activity in the afternoon, which is not ideal, but it's the only time we can fit it in. But usually what happens is we hit it hard early in the morning, do what we can. About noon, it's time to eat breakfast. We're kind of on a weird intermittent fast schedule here just based on when we're hungry. We're not hungry when we get up around here. But by noon, we're ready for breakfast, and we have what I call breakfast lunch. It's eggs and bacon, and I'll usually put out some finger foods, maybe some pickled stuff. Yesterday, we had a salad. It was delicious. And then it's like siesta time. We don't take a nap here, but inside activities tend to be scheduled, or cool space activities. So tactical will go work on a pond project or a creek project at that time. And if I have some hardcore writing to do, that's when I do it, is the middle of the day, because that's when it's hottest. And then after about 4:30, like if we have to do something outside in that 12 to 4:30 range, then I set a timer and I do 15 to 20 minutes and then go get water, and then 15 to 20 minutes and then go get water. And then at 4:30 in the holler, the sun has stopped hitting me directly in most of the places I need to work. And that's like my best time to be in the garden, moving wood chips around or harvesting things. I like to harvest when the sun's not beating down on me, if at all possible. Yesterday I did the deed that nobody wants to do, and that's I put a lot of rabbit poop on a row that's going to be planted next week so that it could get rained in. And then God had my back and it rained last night. I was like, yes. So that's going to be all ready for me. That's what it's like at this time of year. By wintertime, we start doing the opposite. It's like, how late can we put off going outside because it's cold out there and we have livestock to take care of? And then at the middle of the day, you're like, let's do the outside things. And then in the nighttime, you're like, I'm going to stay inside by the fire. So the seasonality changes the time of day that you plan things. And the best, Carrie calls it hiding from the sun out where they are. So that is what it is. What was horribly written? I don't even know. Guys, put stuff in all caps if you want me to see it. Otherwise, I'm not responding to it. Our first segment is featured forage, though, and this is what we're finding when I'm walking around in the woods or fields. And at this point, I've been here 15 years, almost 16. Maybe I've been here 16 years. I've been here more than a decade. And one of the things I came to the conclusion of about 5 years in was that rather than taking all of these wonderful wild edible plants out of my way that are weeds taking over everything, I should just let them grow and cultivate the wild stuff where the wild stuff wants to grow. That was sort of my first, hey, there's this other way of organizing your homestead that can make your life easier. That was before I knew what permaculture was. And then I discovered permaculture, and it was like, whoa, there's like a whole methodology for this, right? So a few weeks ago, I declared it a pawpaw-free year because there were no pawpaws on the pawpaw trees. And I just figured that means that this winter, we're going to have some hungry coyotes and other animals that didn't fatten up enough in the fall. Don't know what the persimmons have. We had cycles of late frost this year, and it really affected the fruit set on trees. On my walk, one pawpaw tree has 6 pawpaws on it, and all the other trees have nothing. So it's a light pawpaw year. And the tree that has the pawpaws on it is the one that the county mower hit. They have this thing that raises up, and they also trim the trees, and it grinds them up, and it really rips up the trees. I think it's terrible what it does to the trees, but they don't care. They just want to trim the trees as quickly as possible. So they grind them up. And that tree got hit by it. It's my favorite pawpaw tree. And it has pawpaws on it. And I think what happened is it was like, I don't care if we have a late frost. I've got to reproduce because I got damaged last year. So that's kind of cool. That means we'll get to have our September 3 or 4 pawpaws that I eat every year because I get pawpaws for a week. They don't store well and they don't travel well, which is why I think they're not in stores to buy. So I tend to harvest them when they're ripe. And when they're ripe, they look overripe. They look terrible. They look like beat up bananas, but they're little and not banana shaped. I'll throw them in my fridge. They last a week or 2 in the fridge, and I'll eat no more than 1 a day just to balance out because otherwise I get like a sugar rush and it's crazy. The other thing that's like, this goes all summer, but the red clover is there. I've harvested what I need for the winter and dried it. But last Sunday, I woke up feeling not great. And on my walk, I saw red clover, and so I picked it. And I saw mullein, so I picked it. And I saw echinacea growing on my hillside garden, so I picked it. And then I was like, this is going to taste like grass. So I picked chocolate mint as well, made a tea, and it was great. So all of those things are in season. We have creek mint, lamb's quarter. It's about the final round of harvesting because it's going to get too old and put on seed next. And this year's been the first year I've harvested the lamb quarter here in 16 years. I've harvested it like, oh, I guess that's the second time. I've harvested one other time, but I have a pretty good patch going that's not overwhelming and not in a place that's annoying. And so I've just been throwing it into sautés. I pick the most tender leaves off the top and then go there. But it'll go to seed, and then I can decide where I want to scatter more seeds of lamb quarter to have more next year. But guys, once lamb quarter takes over an area, it's kind of like the apple mint. It's hard to get out. So just be aware of that. But it is a really delicious green that is edible and flourishing at the time of year when a lot of the other tender greens are not. And so it's nice to add it with my green beans and other things that are coming from the garden. Elderberries are acting differently this year. So usually what happens is they flower for a while, then they put on berries, and then the berries ripen. Most of the berries ripen almost all at the same time over a 2-week period of time. And we collect those, we freeze them, then we take them off their stems, and then I have those for winter cough syrups and whatever. I used to make jellies and jams out of them, but I don't eat jelly jams anymore, so I don't do that. This year, there are berries set that are ripening, and there are cycles of elderberries still putting flower on. So I think because we've had a cooler summer than last year, and a lot of people are saying, isn't it hotter this year? And the answer is no, it's not. No, it's not. Based on my homesteading journal that I keep, this year we've had some hot days, but it's nothing like last year. Last year was just hot. This year we're cooling down at night. It was like 88-degree high yesterday. That's below 90. I'm still getting fruit set on my tomatoes right now. Usually at this time of year till about 3 weeks into August, it's so hot we don't get fruit set. And so it's like you get tomatoes and then you don't get tomatoes for 3 weeks. And then if your tomatoes make it through the dog days of August, then you get tomatoes from them again. Because when it gets too hot, you don't get fruit, right? So the elderberries are acting differently, and I'm guessing this is how they act in other places where it doesn't turn into inferno in the summer. And that's kind of cool. So you can still harvest elderflower right now here, and it's about time to harvest elderberries. So you can kind of have both worlds at the same time. I thought that was pretty cool. That happens near the creek. So near the creek is where the elderberries are behind. And I think it's because their feet are colder because of the water. That's the only thing I can imagine. Because a lot of what's happening is that the water that comes in our creek comes out of the ground. So it's coming out at about 55 degrees. So once it's been above ground for a while, it warms up. But right where it comes out, those elderberries are not setting fruit yet. I see somebody in the comments. It's Lucky. I saw your question. If you have a question, guys, a reminder, if you want me to respond, put it in all caps so I can see it. The question is, do you know a plant used for pain? Thank you. I know lots of plants used for pain. It really depends on the kind of pain you have. And, I find that comfrey reduces swelling. Plantain helps with pain. I have a lot of luck with turmeric and some other things. And then there are some other like slippery elm and willow are pretty good. But it really depends on the pain you have. I have found that to the best of my ability, getting to the underlying cause of the pain makes a huge difference. Carrie says wild lettuce. That's another one that can be really good. Of course, there's always the opium poppy. But there are lots of different ways to address pain with plants and other things. If you get to the underlying cause, it helps. I know I had a lot of low back pain before I started 75 Hard, and it's gone. And the things that have changed is I've lost weight, so there's less pressure on my joints. And I started Pilates. And Pilates helped me with back pain. So I was using an anti-inflammatory and turmeric pills, which is an anti-inflammatory. And I started Pilates, which strengthened my core, which has virtually eliminated all my low back and sciatic pain. So the exercise dealt with the root cause, and that's been a much better experience for me long term. And I'm glad I did that because, going into your 50s with low back pain means you go into your 60s with mobility problems, and nobody wants that. I've also got yarrow coming up in the yard, thanks to Carrie Brown from Strong Roots Resources. I have not harvested any, and I don't think I'm going to this year. I'm just going to let it become itself so that next year I have a better crop. If I need yarrow for something in the winter, I'm sure other people in our community will have it. And that's the thing about homesteading, guys, is the community is the most important part, and talking to each other and helping each other out is something that I find is really cool about homesteaders in general. Next segment is livestock, and this is where I talk about the animals on the homestead, which is where the majority of our focus goes here. I do grow plants and preserve food, like the plant food, but I also grow plants for the animals, and it's time. I still haven't pollarded the fodder trees, and I need to get that done. I might have to ask somebody to come out and work for me to help me get that done because of my travel schedule. We'll see. If I don't get it done this year, then I'm going to have a problem. So that is what it is. And thank you, A-Rape here. We had baby rabbits this week, and it's probably our last batch of rabbits until the fall because it's now warm enough that the boys will be shooting blanks. And that just happens in the summer. Rabbits are not a hot season animal, but we have produced a lot of rabbits this year so that we can feed the dogs raw. We have run into a challenge with feeding the dogs raw, and it's a personal problem, right? We have our systems set up at the homestead to where you do this, and then you do that, and then you do that, like so that it's a routine every day. And Tactical is primarily the one who feeds all the animals in the morning. And so to feed the dogs raw is a change from the routine. So a couple of times we've pulled the thing out of the freezer and then forgotten to give it to the dogs, and then it went in the compost because it stayed out too long. And that's something we're going to start addressing. Like, how do we make that a routine? Because it's not every day, it's every other day or every third day. And it's just funny how that happens. Like, when you're on a homestead, you start something like, I'm going to raise rabbits, or I'm going to raise chickens, or I'm going to sprout black oil sunflowers to feed my poultry, or whatever it is. You have this thing you're going to do. And for the first 2 weeks, it's so hard. It takes so much time. And then it just becomes part of your day. Like, you figure out efficiencies, you figure out how to fit it in one thing after another. Like, if you think about what's for dinner in the morning, then you can take it out of the freezer and maybe put it in the crock pot if that's how you're cooking it. And it cooks itself all day. And it like took you 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night. And you're done, right? Wherein if you just start thinking about cooking at 4 p.m. and you have to defrost it, you spend time defrosting it, you spend time looking up recipes, you spend time doing all the things, you're watching over it while it's cooking. That takes a lot more time. That's true for anything on the homestead. So you get into this routine, and then the minute you go off that routine, you screw up and you forget steps. So we're figuring out how to fit the raw food schedule, which is not an everyday thing, into everything else we do here. And we've had a few stumbles along the way. So that's been our challenge. We incubated a second round of duck eggs. And this is really interesting. So last time we started with about 24 eggs, and we got 9 ducklings out of that. And what happened is about 5 of the eggs or 6 of the eggs were not fertilized. And then during the hatching process with ducklings, you have a higher failure rate than with chickens in an incubator, in my experience. So it's about a 50% success rate on hatching eggs in the incubator. Every single one of those 9 ducks was female, which is really weird. Like, that's statistically not usually what happens. So we just did our second round. And same thing. Some of the eggs were not fertile. I showed the Eversoles how to candle eggs, and they thought that was really cool. And 8 eggs produced ducklings. And they're all female. So apparently I have a drake that's throwing all females, which is actually good because the breed that we're hatching right now are khaki Campbells, and it's an egg-laying breed. So it's not great for meat. It's fine for duck stew, but you don't get a lot of bulk on it for duck meat. So I'm throwing all females for an egg-laying flock. I might do a third round of khaki Campbells before we get into fall. I'm going to talk to Tactical about if he wants to do that, how many more ducks we want. But we have managed to replenish the entire flock. Right now, you're looking at $8 to $10, $12 a bird to buy baby ducklings. We have replenished whatever 9 plus 8 is, right? So 17 birds in in the summer. So 17 times, let's say it's $10 a bird to make the math easy. That's $170 I would have spent on shipping ducklings here. And I did it for something that cost me $230. So I have not broken even on the incubator I bought for this yet, but one more round and I have, and then I have it next year too, and the next year. So that's been a pretty cool little Operation Independence thing that's happened here. And the trade-off has been I don't get 20 ducks at one time. I'm getting, 8 or 9 ducks at a time. But they're all girls. So that's actually probably more like I'd have to pay special to get all girls. I haven't looked that up. If somebody in the comments wants to look up how much khaki Campbells are if you do female only, let me know. I'm very curious how much I would spend on that. Along that lines, the first round of 9 ducklings have been trained with all ducks go to bed. So we yell all ducks go to bed, and then they go into their coop at night. And we do this so that if at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I need to go to choir practice, tactical for whatever reason is not here, I can yell at 3 o'clock, all ducks go to bed, and they will go into the coop. I can close them securely in the coop and go away, and I don't worry about predators. And if I'm going to be out till after dark, then that's done. And that's one of the things about raising ducklings I love, is that you can train them and they will be like, well, it's not time for bed, but she said go to bed, so I'm going to bed. So our next step there, because they're going into a temporary coop right now, is to tell them to go to bed in the big coop. We let them out at about 3 p.m. and they interact in the yard with all the other ducks that already exist. And one night, everybody's going to go, probably one night this week before I go out of town again. All the ducks are going to go to bed in the primary coop. And once we've done that 3 or 4 times, like what happens is they're confused. They're like, we thought this was bed, but now you're ushering us towards this other thing. It's a 2 to 3 person job to do this. They'll go to bed there. And then the new ducklings who are also in the temporary coop, but in a brooder, will eventually be let out of the brooder and into that temporary coop, and then out of that coop into the fenced yard, and then eventually out into the big yard and taught to go to bed. And then they will be taught to go to bed with everybody else. And it's just that's how I integrate ducks. It's a little different than how I integrate chickens, but I've never had a problem with them getting attacked that way. So I do wait until they're, I guess, duckling round 1 are 8 or 9 weeks old now. So they're almost full-sized when compared with the other ducklings that we have. Back to the routine thing. So with the Holler Roost, which the plans for Holler Roost are now available for sale. And Steve, can you put the link to that in the comments? And if that doesn't work, email it to me. I'll pull up my email so I can tell people. So somebody reached out to Steve Eversole and said they could turn his design into plans. So the Holler Roost plans are available for $30 on Etsy right now. I believe it's 30. And if you want to grab them, you can. Holler Roost has an automated door that lets the chickens out and puts them in at night, and chickens just go to bed when it's dark. This means that there's no reason for us to go look at the chickens except for to check their food and water. So what has been our routine is let them out, look at the food and water, put them back in at night, look at the food and water. And in this way, twice a day, the chickens are getting interacted with. Tactical told me today he's having a little bit of he has to remind himself to check the food or water because he does not have to check the chickens got let out or chickens got let in. And we're not getting eggs from them yet. So that's changing also the routine of things that we do, because we can check the food and water once a day now at noon. Doesn't matter what time. And then that means you can focus other morning activities on morning things. But you definitely never want your chickens running out of water, especially when it's this hot. We are assessing our sheep for pregnancy. We think Brunhilde is going to give birth in August at some point. I'm going to go look at her and see what I think. I probably have on the calendar the day that she got caught. So it's 5 months after that is going to be sometime between now and mid-August. We are going to separate the males from the females starting around August 1st, I believe. I'll see when we want to. We'll bring the males over to my homestead and rotate them through the homestead here, keep the females off site so that we have no possible pregnancies where we have sheep delivered in the coldest night of the year in January, like we did last year. We made that mistake last year. So we're going to separate them and then put them back together in probably mid-October, November to then hopefully get some spring offspring, so to speak. So Steve's going to send me the link in email, and I will check that in a little bit for Holler Roost plans, because YouTube said no link for you. No linky for you. I will probably link it at NicoleSauce.com too, so that we can just tell people with words where to go. And then we finally got the 2-wire system up for the goats on the homestead. So we let we let the goats out to start foraging here, which is good because they're here for brush control. And one of the goats, so Wilma, the one I got from John Willis, is like, nope, I like my little box. I'm staying in my box. I'm not going out there, and I'm going to stay in here. And then Clover is like happy as could be out there foraging and eating underbrush and all the things that we want her to eat. Our next segment is Grow. This is where we talk about what's growing on the homestead. And this is primarily in the gardens, right? So I'm having a really good garden year. And part of that is that I clued into the fact that this year is a year where I can't depend on my former backup plan where, Steve, don't embed links like that if I'm going to put them in the comments, because I have to put the actual link without the embed in there. So anyway, and it doesn't take me to where I want to be. Shoot. Anyway, it's been a really good garden year for me because I clued into that would have to be, here it is. Here is the link to the Etsy store, everybody. And I've been pretty pleased with it. The one thing I have not been pleased with is that my beets, it came across as 2 text messages. How annoying is that? If you look at that link, and I think the question mark after 25 will probably get you there, but maybe not. If not, guys, look in the show notes later. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. The beets have not done well. I'm going to get like 10 beets. And I've planted 2 sets of beets, and it just hasn't been the right situation for them, which makes me sad because beets are one of my favorite things to pickle. Luckily, I pickled a lot of beets last year. Now, I'm going to try about August 15th putting beets in a place basically where I just put all the rabbit poop yesterday to soak in. I'm going to try putting beets there with shade cloth over it. Oh, good. The link works. Excellent. And the shade cloth will hopefully help with germination, and we'll see if that section of soil works better than where I grew them. Other than that, though, I'm going to give you an update on tomato blight. This time of year is the time of year when the late blight starts going up the vines and kills the tomatoes in Tennessee. Everybody here complains about it. There's nothing you can do about it. I have tried everything to deal with tomato blight. I have done a foliar spray with salt and Dawn and whey from cheese I'm making. And I have tried different antifungal sprays before I went fully organic. That was years ago. Don't do that. Doesn't work. I have tried trimming off all the bad leaves and burning them and or putting them in the trash can and never putting them in my compost. I've tried rotating the tomatoes to different places. I have tried various old-timey things. And last year, I heard Jack Spirko say that he was trying something, and that was to put aspirin in. When you plant each plant, you put 2 or 3 aspirin in the soil around the plant. And I'm like, there's no way that's going to work. But I love tomatoes. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try it anyway, because aspirin's not going to hurt the tomato plant. So we'll just put it in. And last year, I didn't have a blight problem. So I asked the other farmers, did you have a blight problem this year? And they said no. And I was like, okay, it was just the year. So this year I tried it again. And this year I was late starting my tomato seedlings. So a friend of mine who is in the area gave me tomato seedlings. So we're using the same seedlings. And this year I did it again, and I put the aspirin in. And I put them in the ground, and I don't have blight. So I asked my friend, do you have blight? And she said she's eaten up with blight this year. So it appears that the aspirin helps strengthen plants to be able to fight off the blight. We'll see how it goes, but compared to somebody with the same plants in the same county growing in the same growing situation as me, I don't have blight. I mean, I have a couple leaves right now, but I don't have blight, and she is like, her tomatoes are almost done. So just, I have been putting aspirin in once a month. In fact, I need to do it now. And I'm a little late. I'm 5 or 6 weeks since the last time I put aspirin in. So I do it on a 4-weekly schedule, except for when I don't, but it's going well. Tactical isn't doing much in the growing vegetable department, but he has some pet projects he's doing. He has peppers every year, and he said he has like little peppers coming on, and then he's trying to get a dill patch established. So where he concentrates is something, he's trying to make that a perennial like thing where I have a dill patch on this property that I can count on every year. And he asked me to go take a look at it because it's not big, tall, lush, awesome dill. And I did. And he's like, I think it needs more sun. And I said, probably. He's like, can I cut this branch out above it? I was like, sure. So we'll see how that goes. I have dill in other places on the property, and I have just enough for my pickling needs right now, which is good because nobody's selling dill in the area. And hopefully one of these years we'll get the dill patch going. We have a bed down by where he lives that I called the mottled shade bed. And he's like, nothing's growing great there. I'm like, because it doesn't get light. However, I have ground cover that I got from Andy that I have put some out around the property, but it thrives in shade or mottled shade. And I said, we should put that down there. And then we are going to move all of my thorny berries there because it's a raised bed. And I've been kind of like, I've been raising these things in pots for 2 years because once you put thorny things in your yard, you have thorny things in your yard. And I've been thinking like, I want to build a way to contain this. I don't want to put it on a fence line. And I just don't want to have like a gnarl to deal with. And then if we put it where the sheep graze, they'll just eat it. So we either have to put it where the sheep graze, protected from the sheep or something. But what I want is easy maintenance. And so a raised bed is a great place for that. I'm going to put a trellis up the center, and then I'm putting wineberries and gooseberries there. And it'll be half and half. I already have the wineberries cloned from the wineberries that are growing out from under the shed. I got wineberries from under the shed this year, just a couple handfuls. And that'll be my thorny plant area. And the only other thorny plants in the yard at that point are roses, which if anybody tells me to move my roses, they can saw it off. That's just my opinion on the whole thing. Having a great green bean year. I think I mentioned Monday, I'm not quite halfway to my green bean canning goal. And I harvested a bunch more yesterday, which are enough to feed us for the next week. So then on Sunday, Monday, I'm not sure which of those 2 days I will harvest. I'll do another round of harvesting. And my second row of green beans that I planted, because I plant them in 2 to 3 week succession so that I don't have all the green beans at once. That one should start coming on by next week. I'm thinking it's got flower on it right now, and then we'll have little tiny green beans, and then we'll have big green beans. And with the rain and the weather the way it's been, I think it's going to be next week that we start getting, probably as soon as I go out of town for Jack's 15th anniversary. But I'm only gone for a few days, so it's fine. But that's good because last year I was really like, man, I don't have any green beans to can. I have my first zucchini. I planted about 10 zucchini plants, and one is doing really well, and the second one's doing okay, and the rest look like crap. And that's normal for here because we have pest pressure. One of the things I've learned this year is I can do the wood vinegar, 2 teaspoons to about a gallon of water, that spray on the plants, and it keeps the vine borers at bay until it's time for them to flower and pollinate. Now I can hand pollinate them, but I just stopped with that for them, for that deterrent for them. And I'm letting nature take its course. I'm doing another round of seeds this weekend for zucchini, and I may get a late fall zucchini round as well. Zucchini and yellow squash. The Brussels sprouts, I thought they'd be ripe by now. They are not ripe. They are not ripe. And that's just what it is. They're starting to get there. And so I need the race against the sun and the pests to go. I am going to be starting seedlings either this weekend, probably this weekend. Sunday's going to be a busy day. I'm going to start seedlings for the brassica family, which is cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, like broccoli, all of that. Starting those seedlings inside to transplant for a fall garden and see how we do. I have always started them around September 1st, and I've never had enough time. So I will get that going. And then I got onions for the first time this year. That was great. The potatoes, I got exactly as many potatoes as a keto person needs for the winter. Chard has been a perfect balance this year. I'm getting exactly as much chard as 2 people can eat, plus some guests from time to time off of 20 plants. And cucumbers suck this year for me. Other people in the area are having a great cucumber year. My mistake was I interplanted them with the potatoes. So the potatoes were in the row. Then there's a trellis, and I planted them along that trellis. And I have tiny little cucumber plants giving me tiny little cucumbers. They're like 12 inches long. However, where I had the cucumbers last year, some cucumbers planted themselves. And that's where I'm getting big cucumbers. So I'm getting 2 to 3 a week from that. It's terrible. I'll probably put out some more cucumber seed and hope. But that was a me thing and not a season thing, because apparently everybody else is having a great cucumber year. Malabar spinach is doing well. And over at base camp in the pig area where the pigs were, there is an enormous amount of squash growing. So the pigs pooped squash seeds out, and we have squash plants galore. So we'll have plenty of winter squash. I still have butternut squash from last year, though. So I was just talking to Steve and Tracy about, like, use anything you want. I don't eat that much squash, apparently. I didn't feed that much squash to animals. They're feeding them to their chickens and other things. And we'll either use it up or throw them out in the yard for them to germinate for next year. Next segment is the community segment, Holler Neighbors and Community. And this is where we talk about what's going on with people helping people in the Living Free in Tennessee community. Before I hop into that, I do have one question here. Did you ever hear of using copper rods? Yes, I've heard about that. I've not played with it. I know other people in our network are playing with it. The best way to find out what people are finding that from that experiment is to go to Telegram, search for Living Free in Tennessee. It's t.me/LFTN group. And join the group. It'll take a little while for us to prove you in. We're kind of careful about approving people. And then start asking people what they're finding with the copper rods. Or go to MeWe and join the Living Free in Tennessee group there. Those are the 2 places that are most active. We do have a Facebook group, but I don't see a lot of conversation on the Facebook group. If y'all want that to be active, somebody needs to start talking over there, and then I'll support it. That's the way that goes. Anyway. Holler Neighbors community. The Eversoles are being awesome Holler Neighbors, and they made sure that we had a Holler Neighbor dinner last night, which I wish we had hung out more, but I forgot that I had a live stream last night at 7. So dinner was at 6:30, and then I ran out the door and did that. And then they sent Tactical home with enough food that's what's for dinner tonight too. So thanks guys for that. They did a really cool recipe with almond flour, egg, and cheese, and they made keto rolls with that, and they were delicious. That was the first time I had anything like hinting at bread in a long time. Now, from a keto perspective, I would not eat those all the time because I'm trying not to have a lot of seed flours, and an almond flour is a seed flour, right? But as a special treat, it's 3 or 4 carbs per little roll. And that it was really easy to keep me under my target carb count. And so that was a winner. And we'll Steve sent me the link to that, so I'll share that out. Spinning wheel. For those of you paying attention on social media, I found a spinning wheel in where? Indianapolis area. And somebody who listens to the podcast was like, hey, I'll grab that for you. Somebody I've never met in person, I don't think. If I have, I only know them by their first name. And he was like, I'll get it for you. And we worked it out. And on faith, I sent him $300, and they paid for the spinning wheel. And it just so happened his father is coming to this area this weekend. So it's hitching a ride down, and I'll get a spinning wheel, and it all worked. And that's our underground network at work, guys. Isn't that cool? I thought that was a really neat story about how that happened. A friend of ours is raising 100 chickens and needs to process them. And 100 chickens is a lot of chickens to process. So I said, if you need help, let me know, because I'm a pretty fast chicken processor. And she's like, I think I need help. So a group of us in the area, in sort of the Putnam White County area, are getting together with a fellow homesteader friend and helping her process 100 birds. We're not going to do all 100 of them, though. I think we're doing 20 to 40 tomorrow morning. And she was like, I'm so thankful for this help. And I'm like, yeah, that's what homesteaders do. And that goes back to the community, right? If you're connecting with people in the wider national homesteading community, that's great. We help each other out. You also want to find the ones close by. And I have found the best way to find them close by is go to events and meet people. If you see a class, like a canning class in your area, go to that canning class. Or if you see a gardening or seedling class, go to that. And yeah, 20 to 40 is a lot of birds, but there's going to be 5 or 6 of us doing the processing for that. Meet the people, connect with the people, go to your farmers markets. And over time, what happens is you get to know each other. Host some things at your house. Go to the national events. You'll be surprised how many times you're like off in Michigan at a homesteading event, or in Camden, Tennessee, selforalliancefestival.com, and you're right next to somebody who lives a couple miles from you. It's really interesting. Once you have that connection, when you have a big project like this, you can sort of do a permaculture blitz or a homesteading blitz or a GSD, get shit done weekend, right? And many hands make light work. So we've got 4 of us going over to process. I think 5 actually. 5 of us going over to process tomorrow. I have a really awesome Featherman scalder, and I'm bringing that was given to me. I'm going to bring that, which is way better than the dual burner situation with the outdoor propane burner, because it maintains the heat of the water better. And that will help us speed through that many chickens. And then the person who's hosting is going to feed us lunch and is choosing which chickens go this time, so that they don't have to face 100 chickens, just the 2 of them all at one time. I think I'm even bringing my vacuum sealer, my chamber vac, so we can get some higher quality seals on these birds. But that's happening this weekend. And that's what we do for each other. There's lots of thank yous. And I'm like, you only need one thank you. Like, we do it for each other. You've helped me. I'll help you. There's not a scorecard about this, right? So anyway, next up, infrastructure. This is where we talk about what we're building on the homestead. We're maintaining. So this year, I said yes to speaking engagements. And as a result of that, I haven't been home as much. As a result of that, things are a little upside down here, because when you're on a homestead, you're maintaining the homestead, right? But there are 2 people here. Tactical and I share duties. And what we've come to is that when I'm out 2 times a month right now, he's been doing his best to maintain status quo as best as possible, including doing some things I usually do that I'm more efficient at while I'm gone. And if he's like able to make a little step forward while I'm gone, that's success. And part of that is mindset and defining success. Success is not like a huge benchmark forward while one person is also doing everything. It's a small step. And then while I'm here, he very gleefully lets me do the things that I usually do around here, so he doesn't have to mess with it, and then hammers hard while I'm here to make those bigger benchmarks. As a result of that, we've made great strides in erosion control. So we're slowing the water as it leaves the property. And he's doing the things that disturb the soil now, because we have this great weather pattern where it's like rain and then sun and then rain and then sun, which is perfect for growing the things that need to keep the soil in place. So when he reshapes the ground and destroys all of the things, he can overseed and they come back. And we're rarely having to run sprinklers or anything to get that in place. And the solar system is in, but to make it more automated, we need to install a sub panel. So he's getting all of the supplies for that and doing some major wiring stuff. And then we're starting to set plans to put a mini solar system in on my house. Like my long-term solar plan here is a bigger system. But right now, if the power goes out, I have water because that's on the other solar system. And I have light bulbs that charge in my lamps so I can use some lamps, and that's all. And I have a generator, right? So we can use the generator to keep the freezers cold. So the first nut I want to crack is just to use a deep cell battery that I think we already have an extra one of, a smaller solar panel, and then run from that system the power to my gas range, which is enough power to light it up, and then it maintains the thermostat in the oven, so I can use the oven if the power goes out. And then I'm going to put a few lights around that can run off of it, and that's it. Like I'll probably just go straight to 12-volt RV lights in some places. So we're setting plans for that. I don't know how long it'll be to implement that, but I will make the battery. I'll just use an inverter that I can either plug it, like manually plug in to charge the battery off of power, or a solar panel can charge it as well. Nothing fancy. And as we get into the design of this, I'll share it with you because, we talked about being prepared for things that happen in the country, and power going out is something that happens in the country. And having those rechargeable light bulbs is great because I've used them multiple times this year. But the next step for me, without putting thousands of dollars into a whole system, right, is power the things I really want with a small system. And I'm guessing we'll be all in about $200. So I'll let you know the amount when we get, I'm literally going to go to Harbor Freight probably and use one of their panels. Like, we're keeping it cheap. It's not a longevity thing. If it lasts 5 to 10 years, great, but I don't even know that I need it that long. And it can be used for travel if I need it later, or I can resell it to somebody else in the network once we're done with it here. But I'm just looking at ways to make things a little easier because our power has been very unstable for the last 2 years. And I don't see steps being taken, like, trimming trees that hang over power lines. I don't see steps like that being taken by our infrastructure maintenance people in this area to make it more stable. We appear to be going into an unstable time. The final thing is that this week, a four-wheel drive four-wheeler that was not being used by Tactical's parents was dropped off for him to use. And he lit up like a Christmas tree after using it once to go up the sheep pasture, which is super steep, because he's been using a two-wheel drive one. He's had to do all sorts of tricks to be able to use it. And there's lots of walking up and down hills to run fencing because we move fence once a week. So for him, having that four-wheel drive is a game changer, and he's very excited. We'll hear more about that as we go. Finances, we don't have any new income at the moment, but our food is coming off the homestead, and so we don't have the expenditures related to that. We are spending money on food feed for animals. And so it's kind of interesting how that's replaced itself. Anyway, that's everything I have in my notes. Before we wrap up the show, I'm going to go through the questions that you put in the live feed in all caps. First one comes from A. Ray Pierre. He says, I'm feeding my sheep elm tree saplings because they love the leaves. Is that considered tree fodder? Yeah, that's tree hay. I have not used elm myself. I have not looked up the nutritional profile of it. I got fodder trees packages from Nick Ferguson at rareplantstore.com. And when I put those in, I talked to him and I said, here's the deal. My goats and sheep eat the box elder. They eat the crap out of that like it's candy. Like, when I need to get one of those animals to move, I can just pick some from where they can't reach it, and they will follow me because they like box elder so much. Is there any reason not to use that as a fodder tree, or tree hay, as it used to be called? And he had to look up what that was, and then he said, oh no, that's fine. It's a different protein nutrition thing, but it's fine. Use the wild trees on your property that you already have, because I have hybrid willow that I got from him, but we have willow that just grows here. So I went around and did some pollarding 2 years ago of those trees, and last year of those trees, to get them set for using. So If it's not killing them, I would look up the nutritional profile and yeah, I've got more elm tree than I know what to do with, and don't want to poison them. Yeah, don't. Yeah, well, look and see if there's anything in there that would poison them. But if if it's something that animals forage, usually they won't eat things that poison them as long as they have enough access to abundance of food. You know, like we have poison. What's the word? So this is when you guys scream the word at me. It's that really poisonous plant that everybody's afraid of, that has white flowers and looks like Queen Anne's lace. And what's the name of it? Somebody got to bail me out in the comments here. Hemlock. Okay, hemlock. We have poison hemlock in our pastures, which a lot of people would say don't run your animals there because they might eat it. They don't eat it. They have plenty of food. If they didn't have food, that's when they would eat it. Now, we're doing our best to get rid of the poison hemlock anywhere that we find it, but it is still there. Yeah, Faith yelled. She like literally yelled hemlock at her computer when that happened, and that's what happens when you're a podcaster. As a keto, how are you cooking green beans? Well, green beans do have carbs, but they have lower carbs than when they've done full seed development. I don't do too many at a time, and I saute them with my saute. I'm also not keeping my carb count below 20. I'm keeping it below 35 right now. And for me, the keto journey has been most successful when I stay to low to no processed foods. And so if it's a higher carb thing like a potato, I'll eat a little potato here and there. I'll eat a little sweet potato here and there. I'm just careful about when and how I do it and how much. And especially when they're coming in and they're on season, I notice that I don't have a big physical response to it. So that's how I have done that. I will also boil them with bacon and butter the crap out of them with garlic and salt, and it is delicious. But if you're trying to stay below 20 carbs, green beans put you over the top pretty fast. So it kind of depends where you are in how you're eating. I'm not eating any grain at all, and like no wheat, no rice. I am allowing myself nuts from time to time in light amounts, but that's it. A Ray Pierce says, any go-to seasonings for leg of lamb? Yes, what I do for leg of lamb is I'll do a dry rub with rosemary and salt and powdered garlic if you have it, or if you want to use fresh garlic, slit different places in the lamb and shove whole cloves in there. But rosemary, garlic, my favorite, maybe a little black pepper, works great on leg of lamb. It's a recipe that I have used. It's not really like there's not amounts, but it's a recipe I've used since my first leg of lamb I ever cooked. I really like a rosemary pairing with the lamb flavor. Pack Rat says, why is almond flour seed flour and not a nut flour? It's both, because a nut is a seed. And so I called it a seed flour that's back to I'm doing nuts in light amounts, right? Which is why those rolls were okay for me. And a wheat roll was not okay for me on the current diet plan I'm on as part of 75 Hard, which ends on Tuesday. I am that close, guys. I'm that close. John Willis keeps sending me links about how to keep going with it to do a year of hard. So I know where his opinion is, but I'll talk about that, what I'm planning to do after 75 Hard next week. But yeah, so it is a nut flour too. It's a little bit easier on me. It's a lot easier on me than wheat. It's like if I have something with wheat, I get what I call wheat knee, which is inflammation to my knee. My knee hurts. It swells up, makes it hard to walk. When you're not walking, you're not getting exercise, and then like all of it's bad. So I have pretty much just stayed off wheat, barley, oats, rice, all of that, and it's made a really big difference. Almond flour that I had last night in the rolls has done zero to me. I don't have intestinal problems. I didn't eat a lot of it, but I ate 3 of those rolls, man, which was, a good 12 carbs. It was delicious. But it doesn't do the same thing to me intestinally. I don't feel any inflammation in any of my joints. And so that's been really great. Some YouTube videos have sensitized her to seed oils and products. Thanks for the answer. Yeah, and I see like They're talking about seed oils. So the extraction process of getting an oil out of a grape seed or canola or soy involves chemicals and lots of processing to get that done. And those oils, a lot of people think they're not as healthy. I think they're not as healthy. I'm totally allergic to soy oil, so I totally think that's not healthy. Wherein something that you can easily press oil out of, like an almond or a peanut or even an olive, right? That's that's closer to a whole food at that point. Now, I don't use, the only thing I use oil for really at this point is olive oil in salad dressing and occasionally avocado oil in salad dressing. And I'm on the fence about the avocado oil right now. So I've made that change a long time ago. And then some people want to use avocado oil for sautés at my house or for seasoning, and I let them do that. But when I'm going to do a sauté, I take pork fat, tallow, butter, lard, something like that, and I use it as the basis for a sauté. And the way I get it, I don't even strategically make, I get tallow every year when I make bone broth from the beef, because it just ends up on the top of the bone broth. I skim it off and I package it in small little cubes, and then I can use that. Whenever I smoke a butt or make bacon, I save that. I don't keep it at room temperature. I put it in my fridge because I can taste the rancidity, I think, faster than other people. And then I use that until it's gone. And I'm almost like, I use about as much bacon grease or any other fat that's come off chicken or whatever I've cooked with at the rate that it's coming off the things I cook. If there's like, you put the soup, if you make bone broth and you put it in your fridge and there's that layer of fat, I keep that and I cook with that. So yeah, cold pressed peanut oil or Evo here. Exactly. So it just depends. I just don't need oil for anything because there is so much animal fat coming off of the things we cook on a regular basis. And so there was this restaurant in Portland that I really liked called Gravy. And the underlying concept was gravy is a repurposing of something that you've already had. So you end up with fat from cooking bacon, and then you turn that fat with the addition of some things into gravy that you can pour over food that makes it delicious. And the whole restaurant had repurposed dishes that they got at secondhand stores, repurposed blinds or curtains and all sorts of stuff. The tables were used, and they were like, it was, the idea was, everything's gravy, right? And their menu was, I mean, they made delicious food. I don't even know if they're still in business, but it got me to thinking about how food is not something you cook one time. Food, when you cook it from a homegrown cooking perspective, you make one thing which turns into another thing, which turns into another thing many times. And for me, using all of the fat that's left rather than throwing that out it's kind of a big deal, because the fats are the things that are hard to keep in our diet in sufficient quantities to keep us healthy. Like, I lose weight when I eat more fat, which is the opposite of what I was taught would happen in the 1980s when I went to a high carb, low fat diet and got fat. That's what happened, right? I got fat over years, but I got fat. And when I stopped doing that, I lost weight. And, I lost a lot of weight at first, and now I lose maybe half a pound a week right now. That's it. I think my body's very close to the size it wants to be, and I'm not like persistently trying to make my body tiny. I'm just gonna, as long as I'm not getting flus and colds and I can do things physically that I want to do, I'm happy, and I figure my body will equalize itself, right? But if I'm eating a lot of high carb stuff or sugar or puddings or desserts or drinking a lot of alcohol or any of that, I get big pretty quickly at this point, at this age. So that's just my thoughts on that. So I think part of homegrown cooking is learning how to cook with all of the things we have. I even keep vegetable ends that make sense to put in bone broth. So then when I'm doing bone broth, I'm like, oh, I have all these carrot tops. Put those in. That's similar to putting celery flavoring in. It's delicious. I'll keep those in the freezer and throw them in. I'll keep onion ends that don't have dirt on them. I'll keep those in. I'll keep garlic scraps in the freezer and throw those into anything I'm going to strain out, because it won't be a weird mouthfeel, but it'll impart flavor. And that's all of those things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more about that. With that, guys, go out and make it a great week.